All right, looks like friends are joining. Warm welcome to all our friends. Uh, welcome. Good to see Lindsay, Astha from Education USA, Wendy, the Irish are here as well. Warm welcome to all of you. Keep coming in. This is True IC3 Spirit. Hey, Lucian. Good to see you. Wonderful. Welcome.
Good
Okay,
morning.
yeah, we're
And
we're
I guess we
excited.
should say, I guess we should say good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, right? Because everyone is all over the world.
Yes, 64 countries is what we've got at the IC3 festival so far. So, yeah, that'll be lovely.
And
Okay.
John Lou.
Yes, I think Lucian as well. You probably know Lucian. Uh, Angel Lucian actually chairs the IC3 Sustainable Development Committee. He is
Oh,
working on
wonderful.
integrating the 17 UN SDGs with the IC3 movement. So he's an incredibly uh, important member of our volunteer body.
Wonderful.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm going to get started here. Well, warm welcome. Like Angel said, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hopefully, it's not good night. I know the New Zealanders, some of them were up at like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. So hopefully, it's not good night for you. But my name is Ganesh, and as the first IC3 volunteer many years back, but now I'm part of a wonderful group of 300 plus volunteers, and I really have been a teacher and a college counselor for a large part of my life. And we are really on this mission of bringing career and college counseling in every school at IC3. So I'm grateful for your presence here. I want to take most of my time introducing my guest and someone who I have become a fan of in the last 3 weeks because I've been doing research on him and I figured out all the work that he's done. And, and I start to see that I might eventually feature Angel in my Heart of Gold series. But right now, I just need to share his bio with you. So, Dr. Angel Perez is the CEO of the National Association for College Admission Counseling, or NACAC, in which is US based but has a global impact. In this role, he represents nearly 14,000 admissions and counseling professionals worldwide committed to post secondary access and success. He is the primary voice of the association to government, media, and global partners. Angel is recognized as a national thought leader and is a sought after speaker on issues of educational equity, access, and success in global education. Prior to his arrival at NACAC, he served for 22 years as a leader in higher education, where his work was described as transformative. And I can tell you, I have discovered a lot of that work in the last 3 weeks. He most recently served as a vice president for enrollment and student success at Trinity College in Connecticut, where he also taught in the educational studies department. He's a Fulbright alumnus and former visiting international faculty member at Rikkyo University in Japan. He's a staunch advocate for international education and has traveled the world to increase global student mobility. Angel is passionate about public policy as a platform for change. During his tenure in higher ed, the governor of Connecticut appointed him to the New England Board of Higher Education, and he was chosen by the Gates Foundation to serve on Forward 50, a group of leaders presenting higher education solutions to Congress, to the US Congress. In 2019, a Forbes article named him the greatest influencer in college admission. Dr. Perez's work has been featured in many media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, and CBS Evening News. You can learn more about his work through his website, angelbperez.com. I am incredibly honored and proud to host you here at the IC3 Festival, Angel, and we're looking forward to learning from you. I would like you to go first and set the stage and begin to give us your perspectives on the history, evolution, and the future of career and college counseling. Angel?
Sure. Well, thank you, Ganesh, and thank you for that very kind introduction. It's so exciting to be here. I wish we could be in person, but hopefully we will be able to do that in the future. And greetings to everyone who's joining us across so many time zones. I'm always so impressed the times that people are willing to stay up or wake up for this kind of professional development. So thank you. I'm honored to be here. And I was really excited about this topic as well because the college counseling profession, the work of college counselors and admissions officers who are on the other side of this equation is really rapidly changing. And we are watching this right now. I feel like I'm living history, particularly because of the pandemic, but also because of just the way that systems across the world are changing. And so I wanted to sort of point out a few things, and I'd love for this to be a conversation after your points as well, Ganesh. A few things that I think are really going to move us towards the future of counseling. And I think the future of counseling is going to change dramatically because the future of college admissions is going to change dramatically. It is already changing. Many of you know that as a result of COVID, colleges and universities have had to really pivot to think differently about their admission process, about how they recruit students. And they're also asking themselves really difficult questions about what do we really need in order to make educated decisions about what it means to be successful at our institution. And so many institutions, particularly in the United States this year, one of the big movements you saw is that many institutions have removed testing as a requirement to get into the institution. What's very interesting is I'm speaking to a lot of our NACAC members who are admissions officers across the country, and many of them say that they have a hard time believing that they will go back to the testing when they actually we get out of COVID, for example. But they're also rethinking everything from the essays to all of the different kinds of requirements. And I think the future of counseling is really going to require a true partnership between the counselors that are doing the work in schools and your volunteers at IC3, as well as the admission officers all over the globe who are doing this kind of work. One of the particular areas that I think is really interesting that we should all watch for in the future is there is a lot of focus right now on student character and ethical character. I think as we see the kinds of issues that are taking place all over the world, difficult politics, ugly rhetoric, colleges and universities are having real conversations about should we really be taking into consideration not just a student's grades or test scores, but also their character. What are the kinds of qualities that they are going to bring to our campus? And so, if you haven't done some research, there's a couple of organizations you can look at. The Character Collaborative is one that is doing a lot of work in this area. There's an organization outside of Harvard, or they're based at Harvard, called Making Caring Common, and they're very focused on helping colleges and universities with students' ethical behavior and assessment. And so those are some movements that might change. And then I think there's a couple of more practical ones that I wanted to mention, Ganesh, because I think that all of our counselors who are on this webinar can definitely relate. I think the future of counseling is going to change because also student mental health issues have become such a challenge at the forefront. What we are finding is that when our counselors begin to advise a student, they're usually not just advising the student, they are advising the entire family. And the conversation is no longer about what university might be best for you. But when you are having those conversations, you begin to talk to the family about financial issues. Sometimes you begin to talk to the family about, health issues. And so you don't do college counseling in a silo. And I do think many of our counselors are asking for more support, more training in that area to be able to do what I call holistic college counseling, where you're not just advising the student to get into a particular school, but you're bringing all of their family issues into the equation in order to make sure that you find the right fit. for them. And then the other piece I wanted to mention is I think the future of college counseling will change because the future of work is changing. And so it's no longer going to be the case where we are going to be advising students just about how to get to a particular school. But if you read about the future of work, it really is not going to be the case that this generation of young people are going to go to a university and they will be done with their education. Education is going to be constant for the rest of their lives. It's going to be about retooling. And so one of the things that I think hopefully people like me and you, Ganesh, who run large organizations can do is we can bring counselors together, not just with admissions officers, but also with employers to talk about what are the skill sets that are going to be needed in the future. And so one statistic I wanted to share with you, which is interesting, is in the United States, only 70%, over 70% rather, of people in the workforce do not work in the major that they had in university. And I think that number is going to continue, right? And so the way that we advise our students is going to be very different. And I think counselors are going to have to keep a real pulse on what's actually happening in the world of work. I've actually been reading a good book. I'm going to give it a shout out. It's called Human Work. And it's actually by the president of the Lumina Foundation. And he really talks about the future of work there. And another good book for all of the counselors to read is Robot Proof, which is written by Joseph Ayoun. He is the president of Northeastern University. And he also talks about the kinds of skills that students are going to need in order to be successful in the workforce. And so I think that's going to be another change. And the last thing that I will say, which is a passion for both of us on this panel, is I do believe that despite the rhetoric, despite the sort of ugly politics that we've had in the past 4 or 5 years, that the future of counseling, the future of college access is global. Our students are going to be traveling all over the world for university, so counselors will have to educate themselves on all different kinds of systems, and that is the goal, that we really try to send students to the countries and the universities that are the best fit for them. So those are some of the things I see on the horizon.
Well, thank you, Angel. And that's very interesting, some of the comments you make. I can see our colleagues have requested if you can just type out in the chat box the names of the books,
Sure.
and they'd be keen. And there are a couple of other comments that have been left there as well. But it's interesting that you talked about the industry element, and we were very fortunate that we had Microsoft as a sponsor one of the years with IC3. We've had IBM, Uber, Renault come to the conference. So we're very sensitive, and I'm glad you talked about it. I just want to share just a few perspectives here, and then we can open this all up for discussions and conversation. But the place that I came from was when I was growing up in school, there were only three options after class 12. You had to become an engineer, you had to become a doctor, or you had to go to jail. You have to choose one of the three. And there was no concept of counseling. We look at your grade sheet, we look at if you've got like A's or 90% above, you are a science student. If you're like 70 to 90, you are going to study business. And if you're less than 70%, you're hopeless, you're going to do humanities. What a very unfortunate reality that most people, and when I did my research, I found most countries invested heavily or most schools invested heavily on math teachers and principals and English teachers, but rarely was there investment being made on counseling. And one of the things that stood out during that historic period was that student well-being was not such an important parameter. Young people are leaving schools like airplanes without a navigation system, and how does it matter? As long as I prepared the airplane and let it out in the air, whether it crashes or it lands at a nice place, it doesn't really matter. Schools did not care as much historically about the outcome. Schools seem to be the end, not the means to an end. And so I think today what I see the evolution over the last 5 years at least in my study has been that schools are focusing much more on well-being. They're taking more responsibility on what happens to the student in the future compared to what was happening in the past, where it was only about what grades they left with. And this whole idea of marinating in the top 5% students that graduate, the ones who went to Stanford and Harvard and IITs and the NUSs and the NTUs of the world, this whole marination with the top 5%, I am gradually seeing, at least within the IC3 movement, that is kind of coming down. People are realizing that we need counseling as much for the bottom 10% or much more for those bottom 10% students as we need for the top 5%. So that's one definite evolution. There's also an evolution here, at least in our systems, where people have stopped looking at counseling as a means to just go abroad or to get, to apply to college. Counseling has really gone from being a documentary process of preparing recommendations and transcripts and helping do applications to really be about engagement and inspiring young people to self explore and explore outside. So historically, I saw counseling as a process where people explored everything outside, colleges, careers, whatever else. Now, counseling has increasingly become about self exploration. What are my hobbies? What do I really care about? Do I care more about the environment? Do I care about equity? So, really, those kind of conversations are happening a lot more. I've also seen a few other trends, Angel, if I can share that with you and with our audience. So we are going from no counseling to some counseling. Hopefully, we'll go to a lot of counseling. And I talk about many parts of the world, but we're starting to see one teacher who is teaching psychology or English or some other subject get 30% of her time devoted to counseling. And this is quite common. You have multiple roles. Career and college counseling is one of those roles in many parts of the world, and particularly in Asia, in many parts of Asia. So we're seeing someone who has multiple roles. Gradually, with more and more schools, they're getting dedicated career and college counselors. So that's another transformation that we're seeing. And I have to say that counseling is beginning in many schools now in class 7 and 8, versus beginning in class 11 or 12 or in the junior and senior year of high school. So I'm seeing counseling begin in middle school, and that is very, very encouraging as well. And there's a curriculum actually where you're not spending time individually with students, but you are having group sessions where parents are being brought in to address, parent bodies coming in. There are lawyers in the community. There are dentists in the community. They're coming in and talking about careers and colleges. So that's another piece. And then the last one I want to talk about is learning outcomes. I have seen that learning outcomes in class are being altered because of robust career and college counseling in school. Suddenly, the student if a student who's studying physics or math really understands why he's studying what he's studying, where in the real world of careers and colleges am I going to use what I'm studying? Those who hate calculus, they only hate calculus until they figure out where in the iPhone the calculus is used, or where in my life calculus is actually being used. So I think this contextualization is creating what we call at the IC3 Institute the Harry Potter effect in schools. Academic materials are becoming as exciting as reading, Harry Potter. And we're washing away boredom in schools because a lot of people have issues with attention spans falling and, with students not being interested in class and all of those. And we are seeing career and college counseling is actually changing that. And I think that the future of career and college counseling is going to be is so bright that I think it will become a bigger and more important. And again, I'm playing an astrologer here, Angel, and but we can come back to this. It will become a more important role than the job of the principal or the math teacher eventually in school, because today it has been grossly undermined in a large majority of schools in many parts of the world. And in our opinion, we must have as many career and college counselors as we have math teachers in school. There is no other function that deserves more attention and energy than career and college counseling. So those are some of my initial thoughts. I can see there are lots of questions coming in, and I don't know if I saw one around, Angel, if you can also chime in on this one. But university is changing direction. It is very exciting.
Hmm.
Universities are going from recruitment to engagement. They are realizing that when they focus on recruitment, enrollment management is not about recruitment, it's about engagement, it's about empowerment. And one of the
Hmm.
things we've seen at IC3 is universities come in with the goal to engage and empower schools. We have an adoption program for schools. So a university can actually adopt a school and help them set up their counseling infrastructure. So that culture, if we can change that, we will stop treating young people like commodities to be moved from schools to universities, like Coke cans to be transported from one place to the other. And so I think that's the other beautiful impact of career and college counseling is that universities are also starting to embrace it. Their recruiters are becoming more and more counselors, and that's a trend I have been actually watching quite closely as well. But let's open this up. Any thoughts, Angel, as a follow up to what I've shared, and then I'll take the questions. Uh,
Yeah, no, what I would say is everything you said resonated with me so deeply. And, one thing that I think is really important, and I see some of the questions on the side here, and this is all related, that counselors also have to become extraordinary storytellers, just like admissions officers and universities. They all visit your schools and they tell these beautiful stories of what it would be like to be a student on their campus. But what I find is that being a counselor is also very important to be a powerful storyteller with students and families. There's a lot of anxiety right now. I see questions about how do I tell families not to just focus on return on investment, right? How not to just focus on what is the salary that my child is going to make. But it's so important that as counselors, we have the research and the tools in front of us to show data, for example, right? That, students who major in the liberal arts, for example, do just as well over time. There's lots of actual research about that. But also using the connections and the stories of people that your families might recognize. So I will give an example. I traveled a lot in India when the world was open. Hopefully, I will travel again in India. But I was very fortunate that at my last university, we were connected to Infosys. And so I spent a lot of time with the president of Infosys. And the president of Infosys, would always remind families that it is so important to be a good writer, a good storyteller, a good analyzer. And he talked about those skills in the future of work. I would take his words literally and translate them and bring them to the families that I was working with to say, you don't just have to be an engineer. You don't just have to be a doctor. There are so many different paths to success. And reminding families also that as we counsel the student, it really is about counseling the entire student and their well-being. All of the research shows that people who love what they do it better and are more successful. And so in my experience, and I'll share a quick story, Ganesh, if we have time, one of my students at a former university, I will never forget, I spent so much time with him in my office. He would cry because his parents wanted him to be an economics major and he hated math. He hated economics. He wanted to be an art history major. And so, to make a very long story short, the way we got there is we compromised and he did two majors, art history and economics. He did terrible in economics, but thrived in art history, and he is now one of the top people at Sotheby's in New York, making a lot of money, but extraordinarily happy. And it's a reminder that people must follow their passion, their calling, and counselors could really help bring that out in students.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, thank you for sharing that, Angel. I'm going to take one of these questions real quickly and then defer to you. Amrita says, any suggestions on how to de-link return on investment with education while talking to parents particularly? One of my favorite stories that I said in my counseling sessions, Amrita, was, once rich is not always rich, once poor is not always poor, but once a doctor, always a doctor, once an engineer, always an engineer. Education is something that comes and sticks with you and stays with you for 60, 70 years of your life. So, when we start to look at education and ROI and this conversation, I have extreme fatigue with this ROI conversation, particularly at US institutions that I travel to. We really have to look at what's the impact that this could have. If I become part of an alumni network of 500,000 people in 80 countries, what is the return on investment of that education? Where I really, so I think that's something that I'd like to leave you with. And parents really need to know that education's not like something that I'm going to consume and throw away. It's something that I'm going to actually is going to nourish my life for 60, 70 years. So that's something I leave you with. I'm going to let Angel take the next question. And I think this is a broad theme that you talked about. How do universities, Angel, evaluate character of an applicant? Those softer values that you talk about that are so important. So what are universities doing to evaluate that? What are you seeing right now?
Sure, that's a great question. So it's actually evolving and developing right now, but there is a lot of work that has been done in this area, and it's in the initial stages. But what a lot of schools are doing, including the one that I just left months ago, is they are looking at characteristics that actually predict success in college. So they're using research, for example, characteristics like grit and perseverance and being comfortable and being a minority of one, expressing your voice, curiosity, innovation, and actually looking for those characteristics in students. Now, most colleges and universities don't want to add more requirements to the admissions process because we already have so many of them. And so what they do is they actually look for those characteristics in the essays. They look for the characteristics in the interviews. Many schools offer interviews and they might ask questions that lead them to that. They will read your recommendations, the counselors, they will read those recommendations very, very carefully to see if they can find themes of some of these characteristics in students. It is not a perfect system, and it's certainly not a scale, right? They're not saying, okay, how curious are you on a scale of 1 to 10? But I think what they are really trying to do is find themes around these particular characteristics and actually give students credit for it in the process. The way we did it at my institution that I was recently at is we had those actual characteristics on the evaluation form, and if a characteristic showed up on in an application three or more times, so let's say the teacher says this is one of the most curious students I've ever taught, and the counselor talks about it as well, and some of those characteristics came out in the interview, for example, we would check that box and give students credit for that. And what's interesting is then colleges and universities take that data and they track those students over their time at the university to see, is there a difference between these students who have these characteristics and the students who don't? And some of the data is showing that, some of those students persisted, they graduated, others had higher GPAs. And so it's actually, again, still in development, and there are organizations like the Character Collaborative that are working on this with universities. And also, there's a researcher. Her name is Angela Duckworth, and she writes a lot about grit and runs a lab out of Philadelphia. And so she's helping a lot of colleges and universities around this as well. So more to come, but it's certainly a very exciting development.
That's very interesting. And so there is real focus, while the schools are becoming test optional or, are altogether discarding testing, this is becoming so much more important. And I'm going to assume that post COVID, character will be as important as anything else, and they are going to be focusing so much more on it. So thank you for sharing some of those details. We have another question from Doreen, who says, what is the best approach to establishing a career counseling program? Our school is fairly new. I don't have so much experience with career counseling, but want to learn how to guide my students to exploring careers. Parents are focused on specific majors and careers. Did you want to take that, Angel? I'm happy, whatever, however you'd like to do it. Please go ahead.
No, I think this is your area of expertise, so I'll let you start.
Okay. So, one of the things I've seen, particularly with new schools, is that new schools sometimes try to do too much altogether right at the beginning. It takes time to build a counseling office. It takes time to have practices and processes in place. And the so really there are some established counseling offices that you could look at what their curriculum is like, what their timetables are like, what are the sort of events that they run through the year, what are the kind of events or what are the kind of activities they run for students at different levels: ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. The most important thing, Doreen, is that I learned as a career and college counselor is it takes tremendous amount of humility as compared to a math teacher. Mathematics and English does not change in school. The grammar is going to be the same, the algebra and geometry is going to remain same, but careers and colleges are constantly changing. Admission requirements are changing. There are completely different colleges that exist today in India that did not exist, say, 10, 15 years back where I am. And so, there's so much change. Career and college counseling is non-static as a profession, whereas some of the other stuff in school, I mean, let me tell you, they mix the same chemicals in the chemistry lab for a good 15 years. Only the students change, not the chemicals. So, we're in a non-static area, and the key is to keep unlearning and relearning. A career and college counselor cannot get stuck with what he or she knows. And I think that's why professional development, that's why what NACAC does or what IC3 does or what other associations do is so important, because it's ongoing. And Alvin Toffler said it in his book Future Shock. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So, as a career and college counselor, one of the biggest skills is to unlearn and relearn. I am happy to share additional resources. You've got thousands of hours of videos that IC3 records at its conferences and publishes for free on our YouTube channel. So, Doreen, you can actually go in and search by this. There's a wonderful session on surviving in the first year as a career and college counselor by Ramya Modukari from Manthan School. You might want to just watch that on our YouTube channel, Doreen. That might be very helpful for you as well.
I was going to give Doreen good news as well, that the reality, and one of the reasons we love this profession is because it really is a profession of caring people who support each other. And so, establishing networks, I think this is the other interesting thing about this profession. So much of the work is done through the networks and the connections that we all have, college counselors with universities. So Doreen, I wrote in there, you should definitely join IC3 and NACAC. But the other piece is that once you begin to develop those networks, you will have admissions officers who can come to your school and actually talk to your parents for you about some of the themes of how you actually get into university. They can answer questions about return on investment. So don't feel alone, like you have to do this by yourself. There's a whole network of people who are there to support you.
Super. Thank you, Angel. I'm going to take a question from Khushbu, who says, how do you convince parents, students to dare to study his passion and not go by what will help the student make his living? All right. So you want to take a shot at this, Angel? Whatever works.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of ways. I will say, and I acknowledge it is very difficult, especially in certain cultures. I grew up in a Latino culture, and that return on investment was very important. You go to university to get a job, and also that many families only know the careers that are on television or that they have access to. But I will say storytelling, again, that's a big theme for me, is so important to be able to show examples to families of successful people that have taken different journeys and different paths that did not necessarily just go for the engineering or the math degree or the law degree, and really trying to show them the different data around the way that students sort of take different journeys. And so for me, I think it's really important to do that storytelling. The other piece that I have found very successful, especially in schools, is invite your former students to come back and tell their stories to the families and use them as examples. So that student who left and became the art history major and was successful and doing something really interesting, invite that person back to speak, at a parent or really engage with students and families, because then families begin to see that there is a different possibility and a different road for every single student.
Yeah, I think we got most of your words, Angel, but we may have lost you just for a little bit in the middle. But
Oh,
looks
okay.
like your connection's coming back. Not an issue. So, Garima, if I can invite Lucian has a comment. If Lucian would like to join us on camera, please feel free. Please welcome him to join us. And any other of our colleagues would like to join us on camera and share a perspective, comments. I know there are such accomplished uh, members from our communities here. So I would love welcome Lucian.
Hi,
Good
Ganesh.
to
Hi, Angel. Thank you for letting me appear on camera with you.
good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Please go ahead,
Um,
Lucian. You had a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Yes.
Sure, yeah, that comment got a little out of hand. It just kept on going. I kept on typing. I just wanted to make this distinction that I think for anybody in the audience who's a beginning college counselor, there can be this pressure to feel like you need to know everything. Wow, I need to know everything about the US system or the UK system. And then there's another system, and you have to accrue these vast stores of knowledge. And I think actually the hallmark of good counseling is the skills behind it, the skills that Ganesh pointed out about learning. You have to be a good learner as a counselor. You need to be a good communicator. You need to be somebody who knows how to facilitate student insight or to work through the tensions that I just pointed out these points in the message, but the tensions between parent and student. Actually, in good counseling, you want students to own the process and to make decisions for themselves. You're not necessarily the adjudicator of what's best for them. You have to give them objectively as much information as possible, but actually it's a skill-based job rather than a knowledge-based job. And I just want to make that point because I think that could potentially take some pressure off of those who feel like, wow, I can't get started until I know every university in the US, but there's 4,000 higher education institutions. You'll never even know all of those, much less, as I tell my students, the 16,000 universities or so that I think they might even apply for across our international schools. So that was just the gist of what I wanted to say is that, focus on your skills and don't worry about the knowledge as much. That will come.
I think that's great
Wonderful.
advice. And also, wouldn't you say, Lucian, that it's also one of the reasons why it's exciting to stay in this profession because you're constantly learning. It's new every single year. Systems change, and so you constantly have to be curious and adapt. I think that's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
And to Angel and Lucian, your point, when we talked about the counseling laboratory, and we filed the trademark and the patent, whatever, that the IC3 Institute runs, people said, well, the laboratory sounds very gimmicky. Why would you call it? I mean, we know about a physics laboratory and a chemistry laboratory, but what is a counseling laboratory? I said, nothing else in school requires as much work in research, collaboration, and mining data or insights as career and college counseling does. And I think so. To Lucian's point, It really is a skill. It's not about having the answers, but knowing how to get to the answers.
Right.
It's knowing what are the right questions to ask, and then actually having the humility as a counselor to say I don't know, because I find that is incredibly hard amongst educators. I don't know. The principal calls the counselor to his office the moment the counselor says, I don't know anything about education in the Scandinavian countries. How can you not know? You're my counselor. Well, you know what? I never studied, I never had anybody go to Scandinavia. So, this whole expectation that the counselor has all the answers, reminds me also of what a teacher used to do a while back, was to actually share information until Google became the greatest teacher. And the teacher was really helping make sense of that information. And I think the counselor really also, in this case, actually helps figure out what are the right questions to ask. And then when that information or those insights come in, then making sense of those insights is something that is so important. And I think, Lucian, there are very few counselors who are as accomplished as you are. So I'm sure you're already doing it. You should run a class on how to do that, how to ask the right questions and mine all of that data. But that
I
would be
think
lovely.
the other point I wanted to highlight that Lucian said, which should not be lost on everyone, is the students have a responsibility here as well. The counselor cannot just hand the student the answer. So, all of my counseling friends, they give homework to the students and they say, okay, you need to go and you research these schools and you come back to me and tell me what you've learned. College counseling is also an educative process where the student is learning as well. It's not the counselor handing all of the information over. So I hope that relieves some of the pressure that particularly new counselors feel to know everything. You're never going to know everything. None of us will.
Yeah, and this has been so enriching. I can see the comments already. We're just about 2 minutes away or a minute away from the end of this session. I don't want to miss out on saying thank you to Angel for joining us, and also for all the support and the collaboration to NACAC. We hope that our tribes grow, and that we all can learn collaboration, because the sure shot the future is great if we can collaborate. Parents, teachers, students all collaborate to find answers. And as associations, as organizations, our goal has to be to collaborate so that we can bring counseling in every school. To all our attendees, thank you so much for spending time with us here today. And there's lots more happening at the festival. We have 2 full days. Tomorrow, day after, you have the big IC3 awards and lots happening. So see us in the lobby, Angel. I hope you can stay for a few more minutes and meet people in the lobby and just get familiar with this. And thank you, Lucian, for joining us as well, and for your service to this cause. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
There's lots going on outside, so please feel free. You can jump back into the lobby. Yeah, wonderful. All right,
See you there.
We can keep chatting. I mean,
Hey, I'm gonna go to bed right now, but I just want to say thank you both for that. And Ganesh, this is really amazing. This is just amazing. I'm just having so much fun on this. So just kudos to you and to the IC3 team. Angel, I hope we catch up soon again. Ganesh,
nice
we'll
to
talk
see
soon
you
about SDG stuff. Bye.
Yes.
Have a good night.
Bye. Bye.